Okay, this isn't, well, exactly on topic, but I'm sure you knew I'd have something to say about it, so I'm going to say something about it. What will happen to Afghanistan once the Americans, the British, us, and all the other ones walk out? It'll go back to the same old crap it always goes back to. What do you mean always goes back to? You realise Afghanistan is one of the most invaded countries in the world. Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great. The Russians had another shot in the 1800s, early 1800s I think. Britain tried 3 times and gave up. During the 1800s they had India, they wanted to get Afghanistan. The second time there was not too far after the first time. It was only like 7 years or 10 years, something like that. Might have been 15 years after. But the second time, the Afghanis wiped them out to a man, basically. They literally wiped out all of them, and there was one bloke who made an escape, and he had a blooming broken arm or a broken leg or something, and he got on a donkey and he went back to India, and he left the entire camp. Tents and everything just left them there because they wiped out everyone except him. And then, yeah, they still had another go, a third go, but that was like 40 years or more later. The Soviets went in there in 79 and got out in sort of entirely, I think it was by 88 or something like that. And America somehow thought it was just going to go into Afghanistan and it was going to fix things up. The Soviets had things to say to them. Like a lot of people that seem to give the American government advice about their experiences, it was just in one ear, out the other. Oh, but when the Soviets went in, they were just trying to fight communism. They were fighting the communists because they were atheists to a large degree. That was a lot to do with it. Can't you remember the statement, Osama bin Laden, I thank the Americans for helping us out in our fight against these atheists. Help our Christian brothers in fighting these atheists. I don't know if it was exactly Christian brothers, but it was Americans was mentioned. It'll go the same way when the Soviets walked out. Taliban will just walk in and just take it all over, and it'll be back to square one. Now, in case you don't know a few things about Afghanis, it's been one of the most invaded countries in the world. They have something like the first or second highest fertility rate in the world. They also have something like the absolute largest number of firearms per person. I think they may even outdo America on this, I'm not joking. And yeah, that's a couple of things about Afghanistan. The other things are, they're one of these off-grid countries, everybody's, all these stupid blooming white housewives in America. 80% of them haven't got proper sewage. What happened? Well, it didn't get bombed, it was just never put in. One thing with the Afghanis can even tell you this themselves. And they do, and I've read it from Pashtuns, whatever you want to call them, which is, a lot of what the Taliban are, and a lot of Afghanis are Pashtuns. They're more interested in settling scores than they are about actually advancing themselves. And it's a lot to do why the country isn't developed. And it's a lot to do why there's so much war and crap there, because they're too busy arguing the toss over anything and everything. A lot of things that are to do with family honour and family pride. And also, they'll provide for their family, but there's no jobs there, so they've got to steal to provide for their family. And once they steal, so their kids have got clothes to wear, they can steal a roll of cloth, and their wife goes and hand sews the whole lot up. you know, steal some food or whatever, then that can start a whole chain reaction of fighting amongst each other. But the Pashtuns, whatever you call them, are well known for all this sort of stuff, and they'll admit to it themselves. You know, and there have been, and this has happened in the border areas of Pakistan and that, there have been entire families wiped out by something as simple as someone not respecting another person enough when they go into a shop, i.e. the shopkeeper doesn't show enough respect to a person's wife. So that person stabs him. The shopkeeper then turns around and blows his brains out. And then that bloke's brother will come after the shopkeeper. Then that shopkeeper's son will go and shoot the shit out of another one of theirs. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, until all you got left is two old grandmas. There's been cases where these people have tried to get out. They've moved to England, they've moved to America, they've moved to somewhere else. This person has saved up all their money, stolen money, done whatever they can, drug smuggling, anything, to get money. The first thing they do is get on a plane, fly over there, blow the shit out of this person in England, and fly straight back on the next flight, and the cops are at a loss to why this person's dead. It's a family feud that started over the other side of the world, and it just goes on. Now, I'll give you a few things about the Taliban. You may say, oh, the Taliban's mongrels. Well, I'm going to tell you a couple of things. They're actually slightly better than the West. And you're going, what do you mean? How can you ever justify the Taliban? I know they're pricks. I'm not going to stand there saying they're not. I know and have worked with someone who was born in Afghanistan, and they tell you a few things about the Taliban. You know, and Pakistanis will tell you a few things about the Taliban. They are not nice characters at all. You know, they will just, if they don't like you being in a certain area, they'll just say, how you going, to you, or give you a nod or whatever. 5 seconds later, they blow your brains out, you know, not a problem at all. But there's a reason why they got into power to a slight degree. I don't know if their reason is a little bit twisted of a story to help them along. They reckon that people actually asked them to come into power, but they originally, all the people in, you know, all the mosques and all these religious schools, basically, and that. And basically, there are a lot of warlords that come in to fill the power vacuum when the Soviets left. These warlords, I'll give you a story of some of the crap that was going on. There was a boy who was 8 years old. This one warlord liked, okay, I'm going to start swearing, like fucking him up the arse. So it's terrible, that's child rape. Well, it doesn't end there. What happened is I don't know if it was to spite them or because they wanted a piece of the 8-year-old as well, another warlord would go and kidnap this 8-year-old and go in there with their soldiers, shoot, bang, whatever, you know, and kidnap this 8-year-old and then start screwing him up the arse. And then another warlord would kidnap this kid off that warlord, and then the original warlord would kidnap that kid off the latest one who's got... And these warlords were continuously kidnapping this bloomin' 8-year-old kid from each other. This kid had been raped so many times it wasn't funny. But one warlord had kidnapped that kid off the other one, and back and forth and back and forth. And, you know, in the space of a couple of months, there was something like 20-25 innocents die in the crossfire, or 25 people die. I don't know if it was soldiers or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it was innocents in the crossfire. I'm almost certain it was. 20 people, you know, innocents shot in the crossfire between these warlords, squabbling over who had this 8-year-old boy they were screwing up the arse. This is how fucked up this country is. And, you know, this Afghani I work with, he said there, and, you know, he said to me, I want to spend the rest of my life here and I want to die here in Australia. And, you know, I said, what's Afghanistan like? And he goes, it's fucked. He said, it is just fucked. You know, it's just completely fucked up. And, you know, when you hear these stories, you start to understand why he was just saying it is just completely fucked and shaking his head when I asked him what Afghanistan was like. you know, the few assets they do have there were built by the Soviets. What basically happened with this warlord shenanigans with these 8-year-olds, in the end the Taliban were asked, so they claim, by the people, you know, to not just do religious teachings and all this in their religious schools, but actually practice what they preach and get out of just being in schools and actually have a force. And one of the first things they done, you know, was get all these warlords, and they hung them all. They didn't have any trees to hang them off, so, well, they didn't hang them off a tree anyway, if they had a tree or not. What they done was they got their tanks that they'd obviously got when the Soviets had left them behind, or, you know, that they'd grabbed from the Soviets, and they hung them from their tanks, and they basically just lifted the bloody cannon up and hung them from their tanks, and the people were quite happy that they hung these bunch of warlords, you know, and this fighting with this over this blooming boy stopped, you know, and then they spread to further towns and just kept going and kept going. A lot of people joined in with them and all that, you know, and joined as soldiers, and yeah, that's sort of one way that they sort of come to power, because the people before them were actually more fucked up than they were. Hard to believe, but it's true. Now, the Soviets were there. They did build hospitals. They built that tunnel. At the time, it was one of the longest in the world, or the second longest in the world, underneath all the mountains. Oh, they used to have some lovely carry-ons in there. Sometimes they'd start fires at both ends of the tunnel, according to an older relative. They'd start a fire at each end of the tunnel, and they'd just suffocate in there, or they'd, you know, leave them stuck in there. You know, and they'd burn to death in there. They'd get gassed out, whatever, smoked out. You know, and other times they'd come out the end of the tunnel, and they'd be in ambush waiting for them, and they'd machine gun them, but Jesus out of them. You know, as soon as they'd come out of the end of the tunnel. You know, but that was a tunnel the Soviets built. They built the few power stations in existence, particularly the ones, there's ones up in the north. They built those. They built a lot of the sealed roads that are there. What areas are sealed, you know, Soviets built that. You know, and the few things that they do have are Soviet-built stuff, because they didn't build anything themselves. I mean, this is the thing, you know. They have just gone from shitstorm to shitstorm, and when America leaves, you'll find what they've already been calling him for the last umpteen years already. The Afghan president, they refer to him as the mayor of Kabul, because that's about all he is. And you'll find that that'll be the case. Anyway, I'm not joking. Give them maybe only 3 months and they will probably kill him. I don't think he'll last any more than 6. I guarantee you won't last any more than 6 months. But, you know, this is the thing. The Afghan... the troops that were there would say about the Afghan kids, you know, us troops are going back to America, and these poor kids are going to be left here for the rest of their lives in this war-torn shithole and just face nothing but war and bullshit for years to come. You know, and that's going to be the case. You know, there's an old saying with the Afghanis, they fight amongst each other. You know, this isn't a saying, this is actually a well-known fact. They fight amongst each other. One valley will fight with another valley. Back and forth, back and forth. And that may be the good reason why in Restrepo they didn't want a road to go through to the next valley, because it'd be easier for the next valley to attack them. But they fight valley to valley amongst each other. You know, one town will fight the other town. When the Soviets come in, the Americans come in, anyone else comes in, they basically group together and fight the foreign enemy. As soon as the foreign enemy pisses off, they all go back to fighting amongst each other. Holy cow, you know, if you haven't really looked into it, you won't understand how screwed up this place is. You know, all these little bullshit fairy stories written by Western media, written by White House ass-kissers. It's all just la-di-da-di-da, let's paint, it's all marketing, it's all magical picture of we're going to change things, things are going to be better for this. The same bullshit that you may remember during the Vietnam War, that's happening again. Just in Afghanistan with the Afghan War instead. It's all fairy stories. The reality is the place was a shithole, and the unfortunate reality is it probably always will be. Because it needs a cultural change for it to change. And, you know, we'll see. But mark my words, a lot of what I've said will come true. That Karzai bloke, whatever his bloody name is again, you know, he will be shown to be the mayor of Kabul. As they've been calling him for like 7 years, he will be friggin' killed. Bona fide, you know, he will not live a great deal longer. And you'll go back to the same olds. And, you know, it'll be like looking back at the Vietnam War. A whole heap of money, a whole heap of lives, and for friggin' what? For nothing. You know, and that's the way the Afghan War will be looked at in 15, 20 years' time. So, yeah. Feel quite free to download this with savemedia.com, keepvid.com, because, you know, feel free to upload it in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, 20 years' time, and I'll be proven right, I guarantee it.